What if I told you there's an invisible machine, a silent engine humming in the background of global finance, designed to do one thing: turn entire nations into perpetual debtors? It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a system, a complex web of rules and institutions that has been shaping our world for nearly a century. And the most shocking part? It was built with the best of intentions. How did a system meant to rebuild the world after its darkest hour become a trap for so many? To understand this machine, we have to travel back to 1944. The world was in ruins. 44 allied nations gathered in a small town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. Their goal was monumental: to create a new global economic order, one that would prevent the kind of economic chaos that led to the Great Depression and World War II. At the center of this new order were two new institutions: the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, and the World Bank. The idea was simple and noble. The World Bank would provide long-term loans for reconstruction and development. The IMF would be the world's financial firefighter, offering short-term loans to countries facing currency crises, ensuring global stability. The US dollar, backed by gold, would be the anchor of this entire system. For a while it worked. The post-war era saw an unprecedented economic boom, a golden age of capitalism. But beneath the surface, the gears of the invisible machine were starting to turn in a new, unexpected direction. The first major twist came in 1971. U.S. President Richard Nixon made a shocking announcement. The United States would no longer convert dollars to gold at a fixed value. This single act, known as the Nixon shock, shattered the foundation of the Bretton Woods system. The world's currencies were no longer anchored to anything tangible. This ushered in an era of floating exchange rates, creating a new level of volatility and risk in the global economy. Suddenly, countries, especially developing ones, were much more vulnerable. But the real turning point, the moment the machine's true nature became clear, was the oil crisis of the 1970s. Oil-producing nations, flush with cash from skyrocketing oil prices, deposited billions of dollars into Western commercial banks. These banks, overflowing with this petrodollar money, needed to lend it out to make a profit. And who were their most eager customers? The very same developing nations that were now struggling with high energy costs and a volatile global economy. Banks went on a lending spree, pushing massive loans on countries in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, often with little regard for their ability to repay. It was a party and everyone seemed to be having a good time, but the music was about to stop. In the early 1980s, the breaking point arrived. To combat inflation at home, the U.S. Federal Reserve dramatically hiked interest rates. For the developing world, this was a catastrophe. The interest on their massive variable rate loans shot through the roof. At the same time, a global recession caused the prices of the commodities they exported to collapse. Their income plummeted just as their debt payments exploded. One by one, countries began to default. In 1982, Mexico announced it could no longer service its debt, sending shockwaves through the global financial system. The Latin American debt crisis had begun, and the invisible machine revealed its teeth. This is where the IMF, the system's original firefighter, stepped back onto the stage, but in a very different role. To prevent a total collapse of the big Western banks that had made the risky loans, the IMF and World Bank began offering rescue packages. But these rescues came with a high price: structural adjustment programs, or SAPs. In exchange for the loans needed to pay back the commercial banks, debtor nations were forced to adopt a radical set of free market policies. They had to slash spending on public services like healthcare and education, privatize state-owned industries, remove trade barriers, and devalue their currencies. The stated goal was to make their economies more efficient and export-oriented, allowing them to earn the foreign currency needed to pay their debts. The fallout was devastating. Instead of fostering growth, these policies often crippled local industries, increased poverty, and locked these nations into a vicious cycle. They were forced to produce and export raw materials at low prices while importing expensive finished goods. Any economic surplus they generated was immediately sent back to their creditors as interest payments. They were trapped. They needed new loans just to pay the interest on the old ones. They weren't developing. They were servicing debt. The machine was working perfectly. Decades were lost to stagnation. Generations were denied opportunities. The invisible machine was no longer about rebuilding the world. It was about managing a global system of debt peonage. You might think this is just history, a problem from the 80s and 90s. But look around. The machine is still running, and it's been upgraded. Today, global debt is at an all-time high. According to the UN, 3.3 billion people live in countries that spend more on interest payments than on education or health. It's nearly half the world's population. Think about that. For half the planet, paying interest to foreign creditors is a higher priority than investing in their own people's future. The players have changed slightly. China has become a major creditor, and private bondholders now hold a larger share of the debt, but the fundamental dynamic remains the same. When a country like Sri Lanka or Zambia faces a crisis, the familiar playbook is dusted off. The calls for austerity, for privatization, for belt-tightening echo through the halls of international finance, even when those same policies have failed time and time again. The machine has become more sophisticated. It uses complex financial instruments, credit ratings agencies that can downgrade a country with the click of a button. It's a legal system that heavily favors creditors. It's a system where the profits are privatized, but the losses are socialized. When the banks made bad loans in the 70s, they didn't fail. They were bailed out, and the people of the developing world paid the price for decades. So what can we learn from this sobering story? First, good intentions are not enough. The Bretton Woods system was born from a desire for stability, but it morphed into a mechanism of control. We must always question the unintended consequences of the systems we build. Second, debt is not just a financial number. It is a political tool. It can be used to impose policies and extract wealth, shaping the destiny of nations for generations. The terms of a loan can be more powerful than an army. Third, the cycle can be broken, but it requires a fundamental shift in power. For decades, debtor nations have called for debt cancellation, for fairer lending practices, and for a seat at the table where the rules are written. These calls have largely been ignored because the current system benefits the powerful. The invisible machine continues to hum, quietly structuring our world in ways most of us never see. It decides which countries get to invest in their future and which are sentenced to a present of perpetual payment. The question for us is, now that we can see the machine, what are we going to do about it? If you found this exploration of global finance eye-opening, consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon. We release videos like this every week, diving deep into the systems that shape our world.